Hi guys, I talk a lot about having a fulfilling and meaningful career, and that in order to have that, you have to customize your career path in a way that suits you, your life, your personality, and everything else best. But where to start? How can you possibly arrive at a fulfilling and meaningful career? The first thing that you have to do is to know yourself better, and that is exactly what I want to talk about in today's video. I want to share with you some things that you can think about and do in order to know yourself better in relation to your career, and I'm going to touch specifically on the self-inventory exercise mentioned in the book What Color is Your Parachute by Richard Bowles. It's really difficult to have a meaningful and fulfilling career in the long term if you don't really know what you want and what your needs are in terms of a career. And you might not know it explicitly, meaning if that someone would ask you what an ideal career would look like to you, you might not be able to just describe it on the spot, but you might already know it implicitly. For example, you might know that you want to work in a workplace where you have a boss who is a good leader, and that is something that is important to you. Or you might also intuitively know that you're the kind of person who enjoys a rather quiet and more slow-paced workplace. And it's really important to know these things, because if you don't, then in the long term you might get into a lot of trouble. It's the same with relationships. You might get into the same kind of workplace again and again where you work for someone who is not a good leader, or you get into the same kinds of workplaces where it's very hectic, it's very rushed, and that somehow doesn't suit your personality very well. So in this book, there's a self-inventory exercise called the 7 petals, and I've paraphrased each of the points a bit. So I would highly recommend you to grab a notepad or a piece of paper or write it down on your laptop or your phone so we can together go through these 7 things, and you can make your own notes for each of these points. And also, if you feel that it's going a bit too fast, you might also want to hit the pause button and take a minute to think about it before you go on to the next point. Number 1, or the first petal, regards people. What kind of people do you want to surround yourself with? What kind of people do you like to work with? And what kind of people do you want to help, possibly? So for example, does it matter a lot to you that you work with people who are extremely kind and generous or thoughtful? Or could it be that these things are not really that important to you, and that for you it's more important that you work with very intelligent people who are up to date on all things in the industry? Are the qualities of your leader, your boss, your supervisor you work for and with important to you? Or does it not really matter to you as long as the paycheck, the salary is right? Do you prefer to work with people who are more quiet and perhaps more introverted people? Or do you prefer to work in a place where the people are louder and where they laugh a lot? Of course, these are not things that you can just pick and choose, but over the time you kind of get a sense, even if you just go into an interview and talk to the hiring manager at an office. Of course, now with the pandemic, it's not that easy because you have those interviews via Zoom call. But if you talk to some people who already work in a certain company, you can get a feel of what the kind of people who work there are like, or perhaps rather what the culture is that exists in that company. In regards to what kind of people do you like to help, this could mean, in a more general sense, what kind of people do you like to serve? For example, do you like serving customers and helping them with their IT or more technical problems? Or do you perhaps like helping people with their personal problems? Also think about whether you like working in teams or even large teams, or if you prefer working one-on-one or even by yourself. And again, these are things that you might not be able to change or have control over in the short term because you're kind of stuck with the job that you have now or the company that you work at now. But in the long term, if you know what is important to you and what your preferences are, you can kind of steer your career in the right direction. Number 2, or petal number 2, is you and working conditions. Think about what kind of working conditions are important to you, and this regards things such as the location. Do you work outdoors more or indoor? Are you stuck to a desk all day, or do you have to go go around and visit clients and have meetings outside? And what do you think about working hours? Are you fine with working 5 days a week, Monday to Fridays? Or do you prefer to be more flexible? Or maybe you even prefer working freelance? What about the size of the company? Do you prefer working for a large company, or perhaps you prefer smaller companies? Do you like open office layouts where everyone up to 100 people or sometimes even more all sit on the same floor without any kind of separation, where you do not have any privacy and people can just walk behind your desk and everything is basically in this one big room? Or do you prefer having your own office and having your privacy, or even work from home? These are all things related to working conditions. But in any case, I've also made a separate video on working conditions and things you might want to consider in the long term, and I'm going to link the video up here for you. Number 3 regards your skills. What kind of skills do you have? And what kind of skills do you like to use? And these things don't necessarily overlap. You might be very good at 3 things. Let's say that you have 3 key skills, but you might only be excited doing one of them. For example, I am very good at organizing and project management, but organizing is not one of my favorite skills that I like to use. So you can differentiate between the things that you are good at versus the things that you like to do. And here I want to add an important note about industry, or assumptions about working in an industry or a certain job. And let's take, for example, acting here, because I've dabbled in that quite a bit. So there are many people who find the world of acting exciting. And many people want to become actors because the life of the actors that we see in Hollywood on the red carpet looks so fabulous. Of course it's fun. You just play pretend on screen and that's all there is to it. But the reality is that if you work as an actor, there is a lot of waiting involved. Someone once told me, I'm not sure who the original quote was from, but they told me that an actor's job is to wait. And that is true, because oftentimes when you're on set, you have to wait for hours, sometimes 5 or 6 hours, depending on how well the whole production of the film is managed, until you actually get on set and record something. And this is something to consider in general. There might be a skill that you like to apply, that you like to use, for example, playing music. But then you have to think about whether, if you work in that industry, you actually get to use that skill as much or not. So think about what the top skills are that you really like to apply, that you wouldn't mind doing continuously on a daily basis, and then try to match that against the jobs that are out there, and do your research and find out whether these skills are actually applied on a daily basis in that job or not. Number 4, or petal number 4, is purpose. What is your purpose in life? You could also look at your vision or your mission in your life. Basically, look at something that is overarching, that is beyond just a short-term or medium goal. Also try and think beyond what you are passionate about, and here is why. There is a difference between what you're passionate about and what your purpose is. Sometimes, and this is the ideal situation, these two things overlap, but not always. And the thing about passion is that most people have multiple passions. People are passionate about 3, 5 things and so on. It all depends on how you define passion. I mean, we could go as generic as I love traveling, or my passion is reading, my passion is watching movies. And the more general you get about defining your passion, the more difficult it gets to nailing it down and choosing something that you actually want to make a career. And it's a really different thing with your purpose. I think that most people would have fewer purposes in life than they would have passions. And this is an example I can think of where purpose and passion are not necessarily aligned. Let's say, for example, that for this one person, it's extremely important that they get to write a biography of their late grandfather or grandmother, and wants to publish a book that tells history about their life, how they struggled, how they built their business, or how they immigrated to America or Canada, and so on. And there are a lot of steps involved in the process. You not only have to write the book, but you also have to do research, you have to look for resources, interview some family members, and you also have to work on pitching your book so that someone will publish it. And these things are not necessarily all things that you are passionate about or that you like to do, but because you have this purpose, you have an overarching goal that drives you, you are willing to go through all these steps. And I think this is a very important differentiation, because in the short term you can follow all your passions and feel happy about it in the moment, but if you do not follow or pursue what is purposeful to you, then there might be a point in your life where you experience regret because you didn't invest time or effort into the things that are purposeful to you, but maybe at that point in time you were not passionate about. By the way, here I am referencing the 7-petal model in What Color Is Your Parachute, but I'm not really sticking to its contents. I'm largely giving my own commentary here, so I highly recommend to pick up the book and read more if you are interested about this. Okay, let's go on to number 5, which is knowledge. And this regards the knowledge that you already have, all the things that you know about the world of work, about industries, about jobs, versus what you are interested in. And here it really requires thinking outside of the box, because oftentimes the problem is that after studying something, getting a bachelor's, a master's degree for up to 5-6 years or so, we get so stuck in that kind of knowledge bubble, and that is largely all that we know. And then we get into a job, into a certain industry, and we get used to the jargon and also to the way of thought in that particular industry, and also the people surrounding us, they are also talking the same language, and we over and over we hear the same information again and again. And after spending a lot of time in that same kind of environment, you tend to get stuck with that kind of knowledge. And if you're happy there and you love it, then it's all fine, then you don't really need to do anything about it. But if you somehow have a feeling that you're not in the right place, then you will be missing out on a lot if you don't try and think outside of the box and try to step outside of that little world and try to explore other things. Because there are so many people who started a new career in a new industry at a later stage of their life, even in their 40s, 50s, and beyond. For example, I've mentioned this example before. My mother started a career in teaching Tai Chi in her late 60s. But when she was in her 30s, she was a pharmacist and a language teacher, by the way. She would never have thought, not in a million years, that one day she would become a Tai Chi teacher. So a lot of things can still change in your life, especially if now you're only in your 20s or 30s. So try and get unstuck and try to expose yourself to more things, and you might just find another career, another job that is perhaps even better suited to you. So make a list here about all the things that you already know, the subjects or the themes, versus a list of all the things that you are interested in and don't know as much about yet. Number 6 is salary and responsibilities, and this is something that can change over time. When you just graduated from university, you might have been okay with any salary as long as it was a decent job. But after working for 5 years, 8 years, or 10 years, then perhaps your expectations might change. Maybe you are no longer okay with that kind of salary because now you have a family or you have kids and you have people to take care of, and you might want to reconsider whether the salary that you're getting right now is still appropriate for your needs. You might need a higher salary, which means that you might need to ask for a salary increase at the company that you are working at now, or you might even need to get creative and try to look for other income sources. But the first thing that you need to do is to have an estimate about what an ideal salary could look like. Some people, on the other hand, might have a salary that is much more than they need. I know this sounds silly. I mean, a salary can never get too high, right? You want all the money that you can get, right? But I would say no, it's not always the case. I worked in my banking job for quite a long while, and it was really well paid with all the benefits and bonuses and so, but despite getting that kind of salary, I wasn't happy with the working conditions, the environment, the industry, and everything. So I was fine getting paid less, at least for some time, in order to work in an industry that I preferred. This is something worth thinking about, because having a higher salary does not automatically mean that you will have a higher quality of life, because there are so many things that go into quality of living. I think that the proximity to your office distance and the amount of time that you spend on the road to get to your job, I would be okay, for example, to work at a job where I would be paid slightly less, let's say 5%, but it would only take me 5 minutes to walk there or to bike there, instead of having a job where I'm paid maybe 10-20% more, but I have to commute for 1.5 hours every day, back and forth. That would make 3 hours. And also think about your salary in relation to your responsibility. Do these two things match? Because I've seen a lot of people in the workplace who have a salary that is mismatched with their responsibilities. So over time, they've worked at a certain company, let's say for 5 years, and in the beginning, they had a really small scope. But over the years, their responsibilities increased, but the salary kind of lagged behind. So think about the relation between salary and responsibilities. And it goes both ways, like I said before. It might be the case that you want more responsibilities so that you can demand a higher salary, but you might be someone who is at a stage in your life where you want your responsibilities reduced and you are okay to accept a lower salary. And that would mean, for example, working 4 days a week instead of five days a week. Think about your responsibilities in terms of scope. Are you happy with being responsible for the global operations of a company or the operations in Southeast Asia? Or do you prefer to have a smaller scope where, for example, you only oversee a certain region or the sales in a certain city? And there's no right or wrong answer to this because it's really a matter of preference. Number 7 is geography, and this is something that is personally very important to me. This means where in terms of locations, not only in a country but in the world, do you want to live and work? Do you prefer rural areas or urban areas? Do you prefer to work in a city close to the mountains or closer to the sea? And what about the climate? Do you love colder weather or hotter weather? One of the reasons why I moved to Canada is because I enjoy colder weather a lot more than I enjoy humid and hot weather. At the same time, there are also many people who move from colder climates, for example, in Europe, to countries where they have milder climates, for example, Australia or some countries in Asia. And these kind of decisions, of course, cannot be affected immediately. It takes a lot of time to plan these things. So you got to ask yourself, is this something that's important to me or not? Am I okay living and working in the city for the next 5 to 10 years? Or would I prefer to move to a smaller, quieter town? Perhaps I would earn less, but the living costs would also be less. And nowadays, with the connectivity, with Zoom and everything, you might even be able to get a good job even though you are not in the center of everything. And living in a smaller town might give you, or if you have kids, the opportunity to enjoy more beautiful scenery or have more frequent walks or enjoy better air and so on. That's also a very important point about air quality. Living in a city where the air quality is good, the water quality is good, and there's not a lot of pollution is extremely important to me. And don't think that it's impossible. Is it difficult? Is it challenging? Duh, yeah, of course. I moved around in the world so many times. I lived in Germany, in Singapore, in Indonesia, and now in Canada. And each time it really took me some time to really think about it. Is this what I really want? Will it increase the quality of my life? And will I be happier in the end? For some people, it might not matter at all. As long as they are with their families and with their friends, they don't really care where they live. So you really got to think for yourself if this is something that's important for you or not. If it's something that's extremely important to you, where you live exactly, then you better get going and start working on it. Start working on moving to that dream destination of yours, because believe me, it will affect your entire life. Okay, now here's a question for you. I want to know from you, and let me know in the comments below, which of these 7 things that I mentioned just now do you think that you need to change in this year? Or maybe there are even 2, 3, or more things that you think really have to change this year. So if now you've noted down a few things that are important to you for each of these points, now you might end up with a list of scattered things and you don't really know what to do about it. And this is where I think that the book, What Color Is Your Parachute, has really useful tools, because it doesn't only help you to list down all the things that are important to you in each category, but it also has a system where you can prioritize these different things. Richard Bowles in his book provides a system and a kind of grid where you can prioritize the things that are more important to you, and then you can kind of combine everything together, and in the end you will end up with your personalized flower, which contains all the things, the crystallization of the important things for your career, and from there you can start to make changes. Okay, I've not talked about each of these points in too much detail, but going forward I will try to make separate videos where I talk about each of these things that are important to understand about yourself in building your career. So please also let me know in the comments which of these things you are perhaps more interested to find more about. So one question you might have is, okay, this is my ideal career. I already know what it looks like, but will I be able to get there? Will I be able to get to a perfect career that is totally customized and suits my needs and that will make me happy, fulfilled, and that is meaningful? And I would say no. I'm just being realistic here, because it is really, really difficult to get to a career where you are 100% satisfied with everything. There is always a give and take. Perhaps you gain something in one area. This might be, for example, that you work with the right kind of people, but perhaps the working conditions or the salary is not ideal, and so on. But I always think that it's better to move into the right direction, into the direction of what an ideal career means to you, even just 5% or 10%, instead of not making any progress at all and staying stuck where you're at now. I hope this video was useful to you. Please feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching. I wish you an awesome day, and I hope to talk to you again soon.